So let's look at Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which, if Beowulf is written in Anglo-Saxon, sometime between the 5th century and the 11th century. Why those periods, by the way? Because in 1066, the Norman invasion of Britain happens and the language has changed. It's no longer, they don't speak Anglo-Saxon, they start to mix the French with the language, and we get the development of what we call Middle English. And this is written in Middle English. And what it tells us, Sir Gawain, if you haven't heard of Sir Gawain, is one of the Knights of the Round Table. In Dante's Divine Comedy, we heard the story of Lancelot and Guinevere. Those also are figures connected with King Arthur's court, his kingdom of Camelot, or Logres, as it's sometimes called. And the kingdom of Camelot is very much a part of an idealization of kingdom and Christian rule in the minds of the English-speaking peoples, not just the English-speaking peoples. It actually originates, the stories of Arthur, the Mort d'Arthur, are French stories. Thomas Mallory writes one, the Mort, but the death of Arthur is very much part of an Anglo and French series of stories surrounding knights and this kingdom called Camelot, and where it resides. Roughly speaking, it probably resides, scholars speculate whether there is such a place or not. I tend to think that there is. And if there is such a place, it's probably in Wales. So I don't know how well you know your geography, but let me put this on the, let's put medieval Britain down. Helps if you can spell. It's not spelling, it's the typing. Ah, there you go. It's as good as anyway. So this would be Britain and the medieval period and the different kingdoms therein represented. And King Arthur's Camelot would be somewhere in here. And so this area in red is Wales. And the different kingdoms represented here are recognizable English counties to this day. At least some of them are. Northumbria and Anglia and Kent and Sussex and Essex. Those are English counties. Some of the other ones have changed their names a little bit over the course of time. But Camelot is somewhere where my little magnifying glass is here. Down in here. And the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a romance. I say this to you because the story begins with a reference to a place that we've already heard about multiple times on the course, namely Troy. The Trojan War is specifically mentioned right at the outset of the story. It connects the story that is about to be told with the story of the Trojan War. So you might think, because I keep on bringing you back to epics, that this is yet another epic. And it is not. This is not an epic. Maybe you'll be happy, maybe you'll be disappointed, I don't know, but it's not, this is not an epic. The genre of literature it represents is that of a romance. So we've been looking at the epic. Now we're going to look at a romance. What they do have in common is they have a sense, well, both will contain supernatural, what we would call supernatural characters. Both of them. So that's certainly in common. But the difference is that an epic will be a grand meta-narrative story, a cultural civilizational story that will include references to the underworld and the heavens, and it will be a story that unites all stories. The great story that explains other stories, includes the stories within them, that sort of thing at any rate. Whereas here, we're in a romance, we're being told one part of a broader story. So it's episodic. It's just an episode. It's a grand narrative. It even contains meta-narrative qualities. It talks about the gods and the origin of things often. It's alluded background, stories behind stories and all that. Here we're just being given an episode of just one of the Knights of the Round Table. There are many Knights of the Round Table with their own discrete stories. And in this period, many of them are told. So you'll hear about Sir Gawain, but you'll hear about Lancelot. You'll hear about various other knights and their adventures being told. You'll also hear about Arthur. You'll hear about Lancelot and many stories. Percival, the quest for the Grail, all of this also being a part of this whole episodic cycle of romance. So the romance is characterized by, yes, the supernatural, secondly, by being episodic, but thirdly, and this is differential, romances have the quality of connecting to Christian story. There's a Christian aspect to medieval romances that will fuse, and to some degree, this is one of the questions, is how Christian are they actually in their stories? But I think in Sir Gawain, we can certainly say that there are strong Christian themes. And I'll say more about that when I come to the actual specifics of the story. But we'll notice also about the character of the poetry when we read it. So let me come to this and the text. And you can see it here in medieval. Well, I'll come to that in a second. This is Middle English. It says, oops, you can't see it. Let me get this out of the way. Translation by Tolkien himself. Written in 4 parts. The parts are called fits, by the way, F-I-T-T-S. And you can note that they're written in the lines of poetry. But they have very much of there's an artistic, it's a segmented section to it. So here there are 14 lines, and then there's something at the end called a bob and wheel. This bit here, the short little bit, which sort of summarizes the action and then flips it into the next sequence of narrative. So narrative happens in segments, and then there's the bob and wheel feature that connects them. So the style is different than the epic. The epic, which is much larger in its scope and connected through speeches and so forth. Here we almost have it's mostly the narrator that's telling the tale. We don't have as much. So the narrative perspective is also a bit different. But note how it begins. When the siege and the assault had ceased at Troy, and the fortress fell in flame to firebrands and ashes. Note the alliteration that I said was beloved of the Anglo-Saxons, also in Middle English. And the traitor who the contrivance of treason there fashioned was tried for his treachery, the most true upon earth. It was Aeneas the noble and his renowned kindred, who then laid under them lands and lords became, of well nigh all the wealth in the Western Isles. When royal Romulus to Rome his road had taken in great pomp and pride, he peopled it at first and named it with his own name, and yet now it bears. Tyrius went to Tuscany, and towns founded, Langabeard in Lombardy uplifted halls, and over the French flood Felix Brutus over many a broad bank and brae Britain established full fair, where strange things, strife and sadness, at whiles in the land did fare, and each other grief and gladness oft fast have followed there. But you get the whole account of human history right here in the beginning, pretty much, actually going back to Troy at any rate. Remember, Troy leads to the discussion of the Greek world, and then the Roman world, the founding of Rome, mention here of Romulus and his defeat of his brother Remus, and the extent of the Roman Empire all the way to the point of medieval history, and we're talking about Tuscany now, Tuscany, where Florence resides, so the medieval Renaissance, and then even a reference to the Languedoc and Lombardy and so forth, uplifted halls, reference to probably the Crusades. So the extension of Christendom and what we would call the Holy Roman Empire, the backdrop for the poem. Here is it in the medieval English, by the way. Sithen the siege and the assault was ceased in Troy at Troia. The Boer Britain and Brent to Bronde and Aske, the took that the trames of treason their wrath was tried for his treachery, the truest on earth. There's English in there, right? You can hear it. You just have to know what some of these things, like this is called a thorn, and it's th. It's a rune. But in medieval English is recognizable English. It's a little bit more antiquated than Shakespearean English, but you can sense something of that. You know, hath sithen the priesthood provinces and patrones become, wellness of all the weal in the West Isles. So you can see there's English in there. And then the translation. So that's how it begins. The story that we are told, which is one of the best known of all the Arthurian romances, has significant features that we will find in other folk motifs of this age. There is the so-called beheading game, which is common in this period, and also the idea of almost gambling, the exchange of winnings. What I gain, I give you. What you gain, you give me. There's a sort of an exchange going on here. It is written in alliterative verse. Can already see that. Bold men were bred there who in battle. You'll see at least 3 instances of this alliteration in every verse, sometimes more, sometimes within it. Great love of the sound of the verse then as well. Note that he's not trying to rhyme at the end of the poem, but rather at the beginning. It's easier in English. It's hard to rhyme, end rhyme in English. It's very hard. It sounds a little bit unnatural in English to rhyme. When you do rhyme like that, it sounds enchanted, by the way. Nursery rhyme sounds enchanted. Sounds like you're casting a spell. Children love nursery rhyme. They love rhyme, they expect rhyme, but they love alliteration as well. It's easier. Alliteration is better for the English tongue. Any rate, and when fair Britain was founded by this famous lord, which famous lord? Felix Brutus. Bruce, one of the offspring of perhaps of Marcus Brutus. Not sure about that, but I think so. Now remember where we met him in Dante. Dante put Brutus as one of the traitors down in at the bottom of the Inferno. But Brutus is of an ancient line, an ancient noble Roman line. And one of his ancestors goes and founds Britain, and Britain has a different understanding of itself against that of Europe. And namely, they have a great love of freedom. And when you not just read this, but if you read Chaucer and you read Shakespeare and you read Milton, there's a long sense that the English-speaking people have always had a love of liberty. It's part of their root mythology. And they will trace it back very long and deep. So when Americans fight for independence from the British, they're actually not going against the British mythology per se. They're actually living in accordance with it. With freedom against tyranny and against domination and so forth. It's very much a part of the Anglo-Saxon story, very much part of the Canadian story for that matter then. It's not just an American thing, freedom. It's very much a part of English-speaking peoples. Hence Parliament, hence what we call Magna Carta, which is the big charter of liberty, that the king will not rule all things, the king will not have absolute prerogative and rights over things. There will be a discussion forum. There'll be Parliament that will check the power of the king and allow for a collaborative involvement in the politics of the kingdom. That's part of the English tradition that we don't find in other traditions. It's not there in the Roman tradition. We have senators, and there's a republican period to be sure, but that republic ends when Augustus Caesar comes along and the empire is initiated. And in Dante's estimation, the empire is actually God's gift. The English-speaking people have a different take on the empire. They see the empire as evil. They see the republic as good. And Republican Rome is the height of Roman virtue, and whereas the empire is the time when Roman virtue is subordinated to the power of the Caesar, who reigns as a tyrant. So there's very much of a narrative thread there connecting republicanism with English identity and with checks on the king's power. This is a part of the whole discussion here, but I can't get into that here. But they see this all the way back to the founding of Rome by this Felix Brutus, who was in the Republican period of Roman history. And when fair Britain was founded by this famous lord, Felix Brutus, bold men were bred there who in battle rejoiced, and many a time that betide they troubles aroused. In this domain more marvels have by men been seen than in any other that I know of since that olden time. But of all that here abode in Britain as kings, ever was Arthur most honored, as I've heard men tell. Wherefore a marvel among men I mean to recall, a sight strange to see, some men have held it. One of the wildest adventures of the wonders of Arthur. If you will listen to this lay but a little while now, I will tell it once as in town I've heard it told, as it is fixed and fettered, in story brave and bold, thus linked and truly lettered, and was loved in this land of old. Note that in the bob and wheel we do have rhyme, end rhyme, right? In fettered and lettered and bold and old, we will find that same rhyme scheme. What I call the bob and wheel is how the story progresses from one little narrative segment to the next. So it's very artfully told. Lots of alliteration, the bob and wheel, and the structuring by a very great poet who, just like Beowulf, we don't know the identity of the author. It's anonymous. This king, Arthur, lay at Camelot at Christmas tide with many now in Beowulf we saw that there were references to God, but there weren't references to Christian seasons. It wasn't a Christian context. There wasn't the trappings of Christendom. They didn't recognize Christian seasons. They didn't recognize Christianity and Christ by name. The heroes that were depicted did not follow the example of Christ in their conduct, but here it's explicitly so. The expectation of every nobleman in this account would be to deport themselves or comport themselves as Christians. And the chief of those is Sir Gawain himself. So one of the things that we need to recognize about Sir Gawain is not just that he is a knight, but that he is a Christian knight, and there are certain things that come with being a Christian knight. But we begin at Christmastide. Christmastide, the season in which God becomes man, right? The incarnation. A miracle seen by angels, prophesied of old in the Old Testament. The prophets of old foresaw it. visited by astronomical signs in the heavens. So the wise men come, the magi. The shepherds see it. It happens in a manger. So the miracle of miracles in terms of evidence. So that's the context. It's a miraculous time of year. With many a lovely lord, lieges most noble, indeed of the table round all those tried brethren, amid merriment unmatched and mirth without care. There tourneyed many a time the trusty knights, and jousted full joyously these gentle lords. Then to the court they came, at carols to play, for there the feast was unfailing, full 15 days, with all meats and all mirth that men could devise, such gladness and gaiety as was glorious to hear. And they were the most courteous of all knights, renowned after the name of Christ, and the ladies most lovely that ever life enjoyed. And he, king most courteous, who that court possessed, for all that folk so fair did in their first estate abide, under heaven the first in fame, their king most high in pride. It would now be hard to name a troop in war so tried. So, what do you note about the narrative here? Is there so it's a portrait of a golden age when Christ's name is being honored on earth. His will is being done on earth as it is in heaven. The growth of Christianity to change the manners, the customs, the interactions, the worship of God, the treatment of your fellow human being, what you understand as virtuous conduct, all these things have been transformed. Pull this back here. In the Greek epic, the center of life was the polis, and therefore the importance of the day was in politics. And also there was a certain standard of politeness. Poli. These are all connotations, same word. To be in a polis is to interact with others in a political fashion. There's an expectation there. And politeness is the expectations that go, well, how do we see that with Odysseus? You receive a guest with courtesy. You give them a seat at the table. You receive them, even though they're a stranger, as if they were an angel or a god visiting you. That's the expectations. Didn't always hold. Polyphemus the Cyclops ate his guests. Monstrous, barbarous. It's not just impolite's an understatement. Rather than feeding your guests, you're eating your guests. That's not polite. Okay, but still there's an social expectation there and ethical expectation there. In the Roman republic, the res publica, there are certain expectations as well. And one of the words for polis in Latin actually is civitas. Let's go with that. Never mind the res publica. Civitas. And we have this word civilization. Civilization. And civility. It's the conduct becoming of people who are civilized. Certain expectations. You value not just, but you're still valuing the city. Both of them have a sense of the city there and the expectation. So it's not just an individual story, it's the story of a people and how to act as a people. Right? That's there. We've seen that already. In the case of the Aeneid, he founds a great people rooted in around the city of Rome. Rome is then the city that will dominate the culture of the world for centuries, even millennia. The eternal city of Rome. But here we come to something a little different. Because we don't have the city, although we do have mention of Camelot. But at the center of Camelot is the court. Oops, spell. And the expectation of the court is courtesy. How do you behave yourself? Courtesy. And courteousness, courtesy, is an expectation for the Knights of the Round Table as a reflection on the fact that they belong not just to the kingdom of men, but to the kingdom of God. So courtesy is not just being nice. It's not just having good manners. It's the way that you speak and you live, which is a reflection of who you belong to. And the king of this court is Christ. And King Arthur is just his earthly representative, and he has to act in accordance with that, and all the others so forth. But the expectation of the court is courtesy, and you could say chivalry, because they ride on horses, chevalier, cheval. And so there are all sorts of different nuances that come with each of these iterations. But I wanted to like compare and contrast them for you to get the sense that there is actually, despite the different generations and different cultures and different worldviews, there are points of contact where we can compare and contrast. What I wanted to point out by just pointing that politeness, civility, and courtesy, we use all these three words in English as saying more or less the same thing, except they're not saying entirely the same thing. Do you not hear something different between chivalrous and courteous as opposed to being civil and polite? Does anybody want to be called courteous? Does anyone use the word courteous anymore? Courtesy? If not, why not? How come we don't use the word courtesy anymore? Politeness, yes. Civil? Maybe. There's no civic discourse anymore. People don't know how to talk to one another. They swear like F-bomb all over the place. It's just part of common discourse, like a degrading of language. But it's just about how you relate to other people. That's politeness, civility. We're getting rid of those. Oh, we don't care about that. That's just like, that's just window dressing. This is irrelevant. Let's get down to how we really feel. Yeah, and so politeness is probably not sufficient, chivalry not, but courtesy and chivalry, these are specifically Christian. But I don't hear any in the Christian community, no call for courtesy and chivalry. Where does that come from? Where's the idea come from? Why would a Christian want to hold to these civilizational values as opposed to just being civilized? It would recognize certain things. And the things that it would recognize are things that are going to differentiate a merely pagan view of civilization and politeness from a Christian one, which is that we're sons of the King, and the King of Kings at that. And so there's a certain nobility that is attributed to us in this that's not here. There's no nobility. Aeneas is noble. Odysseus is noble. Here, the Knights of the Round Table are noble, but it's not because of their rank or their station. It's because of their conduct. In other words, everyone can be courteous. It's a more inclusive term. It's more, and Western civilization flourishes because of this, not because of that. Did you have a comment or a question? I'm sorry, I ignored. Except it's not very common is what we note, but yes. And it is, and it distinguishes Canada from other countries. I certainly can say that. I could probably comment beyond that, but why would you hold the door for somebody else? What are you showing by holding a door for somebody else? More than respect. You're putting them ahead of you. You got to the door first. You could go through the door. You decide not to go through the door. You decide to hold the door for somebody else. What happens when you do that? Well, you're deciding to put somebody else ahead of you. Very simple. It's not just respectful. It's more than that. giving your seat to somebody who needs it more than you. That's courteous. What are you doing? Well, being on time is courteous. Why is it courteous? Because you're showing that other people's time matters more than your own. It's a hard one to convey. It's not just politeness. If it's just politeness, you can dispense with that because politeness can change over the course of time. Putting somebody ahead of you is, I would say, a Christian value that never changes because that's what Christ did. Christ put himself ahead of us, or us ahead of himself, rather, in his substitutionary atonement. He puts us and our good ahead of his own good. Now, he does it for his own glory, of course, but still, the principle of servant leadership is being articulated through courtesy. I just wanted to show the progression. So over the course of the semester, we began the Greek world, and then went to the Roman, and then we went to the Anglo-Saxon and the Catholic epic, as it were, that showed a kingdom, and it is concurrent with, it's sort of contemporary with this period, but there has been a significant change over the course of that time as Christianization sets in. And so we're not just about mere politeness and mere civility, we're talking about courtesy, which is servant ethics. It's when the knights will put themselves in harm's way for the sake of the damsel in distress. We'll fight the dragon. We'll take on the monster. We'll defy the tyrant. We'll stand up for the rights of the vulnerable and so forth. That's putting yourself at other service. That's what we see here in this. And Gawain is the representative of courtesy. He is the most courteous man in the kingdom of Camelot. So that's, you need to understand that here. But there's a bit of a sting in the tail here in the narrative, because King Arthur, who is the most courteous by reputation, was most high in pride. Now, if you're a Greek or a Roman, that doesn't matter at all. Of course you're most high in pride because you're the greatest. You should be honored as the greatest. Achilles will demand that you honor him as the greatest. He's not going to fight in the Trojan War because Agamemnon says, you do what I say because I'm the leader here. And Achilles says, I'm not fighting for you. Try win without me, you old, stupid, fat man. You may be a politician, you might command the armies, but I'm the great Achilles. You don't win without me. I will not fight. And Achilles wins because of his pride, which reflects his greatness. So the greatness of Achilles is related to his sense of his own glory and honor. This is very different. And so when we come to the Christian era, a man who is most high in his pride is satanic. I mean, it's not explicitly stated here, nor should it be. But in Christian understandings, somebody who's full of pride is not the greatest in the kingdom. That's how the story begins. Now, so that's King Arthur. So there's something deeply wrong in King Arthur's Britain, presented right at the outset of the story. Because remember, the story of Christmas is that God not only becomes a man, but comes in the form of a baby and is placed in a manger where the cattle feed. He's not put in a bed. It's not just that he's in an inn or there's no inn, so he has to go in a stable. Yeah, and where the animals, the unclean animals, eat their food, that's where he is. So he's ceremonially unclean. He's born in this dark little trough, laid there as the sign of what? It's great humility on behalf of the God who created all those things. At the very least that. The King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And here he is on the great miracle of Christmastide. He is high in his pride. So that's the setting. You need to read the subtext there. Condemnation of the man. While New Year was yet young, that day double dainties on the dais were served. When the king was there come with the courtiers to the hall, and the chanting of the choir in the chapel had ended, with loud clamor and cries, both clerks and laymen, Noel announced anew and named it full often. And they go on, and there's lots of merriment. And there is a lady above all of these being praised in the tissue of Toulouse and the tapestries of Tharsia. So it's the age of chivalry, but it's also the age of the attempt to recover Christian Jerusalem from the Muslims. So she's got all of that, the trappings that come with that, and the loveliest lady there on them glanced with eyes of grey, and that he found ever one more fair in sooth might no man say. So the fairest of all fair is Guinevere, Arthur's queen. And it's this great season of miracle, but Arthur would not eat until all were served. Okay, this is noble. Noble expectation. The last will be first and the first last. He's the king. He's going to make sure that everybody's served first before him. He's not going to eat his food. This is courtesy. It's another, just a little subtle thing. You have to teach your kids this. They're hungry, they want to eat. You have to teach them the food's put on the table, and don't eat until I tell you to eat. Don't gobble as soon as you serve. Wait, I realize you're hungry and you really have a hard time holding back. You got to wait till everybody's been served. You don't have to eat last, but you can't start before everyone else. You have to learn to put yourself and your desires and your needs second. That's a hard lesson. And Arthur is following this, at least on the surface. He won't eat until all were served. His youth made him so merry with the moods of a boy. He liked light-hearted life, so loved he the less either long or be lying or long to be seated. So worked on him his young blood and wayward brain. And that's good. But, and another rule, moreover, was his reason besides, that in pride he had appointed. Okay, this is not the good one. It pleased him not to eat upon festival so fair, ere he first were apprised of some strange story or stirring adventure, or some moving marvel that he might believe in, of noblemen, knighthood, or new adventures, or a challenger should come, a champion seeking to join with him in jousting, in jeopardy to set his life against life, each allowing the other the favor of fortune, were she fairer to him. This was the king's custom. The king's custom is that he wanted a miracle before he would eat. He demands a miracle. He wants something marvelous to happen. He's ADD. He wants something really super exciting before he's going to eat. He demands a miracle. Now, this is at Christmas time. What does it say about King Arthur? He doesn't understand the meaning of Christmas. He doesn't really understand it. He's going through the motions. He's a cultural Christian, if you will. I think that's how he's portrayed at the beginning. He acts, but he doesn't. Inwardly, he's not a man. He's full of his pride. So his faith doth proud appear once again, and he stands up stout and tall, all young in the new year, such mirth he makes of all. And then Gawain is sat there, and Bishop Baldwin, and Gawain, Urien's son, and many a lord. And now of their service I will say nothing more, because now comes in a man. So huge that half a troll upon earth I trow that he was. The Green Knight, a giant figure, and green, enters the scene. He demands, I won't eat until I see a miracle. In rides the miracle, a monstrous figure, all green, the seemliest for his size that could sit on a horse. For though in back and in breast his body was grim, both his paunch and his waist were properly slight. He looks like Superman. He's got the waist, he's got the V, like he's got muscles coming on top of muscles. He's not big, fat Shrek. He's like the perfect man, but enormous and green. And all his features followed his fashion so gay and mode. For at the hue men gaped aghast at his face and form that showed. As a fey man fell he passed, and green all over glow. Now a fey man is a fairy man. Now fairy doesn't mean Tinkerbell. Fairy means somebody from the realm of the fairies. He's like an elf. He's a creature from another realm who's entered into their midst, and he's green. What do we make of this? All of green were made, both garments and man. It coats so tight and close that clung to his sides, a rich robe above it, and all of the fabrics therein. And he had a green horse furthermore. And he looks around, and there's big description of him, but we notice a few things about him. He didn't have a helmet, and he doesn't have a breastplate. He's not decked out for war. I mean, he's monstrous. He rides suddenly into the midst of the court, disrupting the festivities for sure, but he doesn't look like he's come for battle. He doesn't have a shield, not a shaft for shock or for blow, so he's not ready for a joust either. But in his one hand he held a holly bundle that is greatest in greenery when groves are leafless, and an axe in the other, ugly. And when I say an axe, it's a battle axe. It's a two-headed axe, like it's enormous axe. But in the other hand, he has a holly bulb. Now, what's with the holly bulb? I mean, holly is a pagan symbol, right? We sing of it at Christmas time as well in the English tradition, the pagan English, the holly and the ivy, the holly reference to the evergreen. In some sense, the same thing as a Christmas tree connotes in European life. It's a sign of eternal life. But it's a sign of eternal life that's not necessarily associated with Christ. It's a pagan symbol of life. And its life may not be the same as the life of Christ. It could be, but it isn't necessarily so. And in fact, in paganism, it most certainly isn't. So he has that, and he speaks. Now, where is, said the Green Knight, the governor of this gathering? For gladly I would talk on the same set my sight, and with himself now talk in town. On the courtiers he cast his eye, and rolled it up and down. He stopped and stared to espy who there had most renown. Now, note that he walks forward to the dais. Now, the dais is a little platform on which King Arthur and Queen Guinevere are set. So in other words, they're set above everybody else, so everyone knows who's the king and who's the queen here. The Green Knight rides in and says, who's in charge? As if he doesn't know. Discourtesy. He feigns ignorance, but it's obvious to anyone who comes to the room, the people that are on the platform, elevated, well, those are the most important peoples, acts as if he doesn't know. And then there's a little bit, as you can imagine, shock in the scene. Then they looked for a long while on that lord gazing, for every man marveled what it could mean indeed that horseman and horse such a hue should come by, as to grow green as the grass, and greener it seemed than green enamel on gold glowing far brighter. All stared that stood there and stole up nearer, watching him and wondering what in the world he would do. For many marvels they had seen, but to match this, nothing. Wherefore a phantom and fey magic folk there thought it. And so to answer little eager was any of these knights, and astounded at his stern voice, stone still they sat there in a swooning silence through that solemn chamber, as if all had dropped into a dream, so died their voices away. Not only, I deem, for dread, but of some 'twas their courtly way to allow their lord and head to the guest his word to say. So you get there's tension in the scene, needless to say. King Arthur speaks courteously. Lord, to this lodging thou art welcome. The head of this household, Arthur, my name is. Alight as thou lovest me, and linger, pray thee. And what may thy wish be in a while we shall learn. Nay, so help me, quoth the horseman, he that on high is throned. Oh, he did notice who it was. He's discounted it. He's pointing out that he's a proud man, and he's honoring himself. It's already a little needle. To pass any time in this palace was no part of my errand. But since thy praises, prince, so proud are uplifted, and thy castle and courtiers are accounted the best, the stoutest in steel gear that on steeds may ride, the most eager and honorable of the earth's people, valiant to vie with another virtuous sports, and here is knighthood renowned, and is noised in my ears. You may believe by this branch that I'm bearing here as I pass as one in peace, no peril speaking, holds out the holly bulb, as if it were a symbol of peace. Is it a symbol of peace? It's a pagan symbol. He's coming into a Christian kingdom. Is this a symbol of peace? Or is it a symbol of anti-Christian sentiment? Unclear. It's ambiguous. And if I'd wanted to fight, I have a hauberk or home and a helm also, a shield and a sharp spear. I could have come here for a fight. But I want a game. Arthur assumes that it's a battle, and he says, no, I don't want a battle. If any so hardy in this house here holds that he is, if so stout be his blood or his brain be so wild that he stoutly dare strike one stroke for another, then I will give him as my gift this gizam costly, this axe. 'Tis heavy enough to handle as he pleases, and I will abide the first brunt. So here's the beheading game. And here, what's the game? What are the terms of the game? Whoever challenges me gets to hit me with the axe first, and I get the second blow. That seems like a little bit of an unfair fight. Very courteous. You get to hit first. Who could deny the game? It's a courteous, putting others ahead of yourself. You get to chop off, you take the axe and you hit me with the axe, and then I get to hit you back. Now, anyone who's going to make such a proposal is not somebody that you want to get into a fight with. Because no one who fears for his life is going to propose such a game. If any fellow be so fierce as my faith to test, hither let him haste to me and lay hold of his weapon. So here we have paganism and Christianity in conflict right away. The pagan seems to have more faith in the power that is behind him than the Christians do in the faith of their God who they profess to believe in. There's the challenge right there. Is it really a battle without spiritual significance? I don't think so. At any rate, anyone who will do this, if any dare reply, and if he astounded them at first, yet stiller were then all the household on the high, both high men and low. And then he coughs. What? Is this Arthur's house? Said he thereupon, the rumor of which runs through realms unnumbered. Where now is your haughtiness, your pride, and your high conquest, your fierceness, and your fell mood, and your fine boasting? Now are the rebels in the royalty of the Round Table overwhelmed by a word, by one man spoken. For all blenched now abashed, ere a blow is offered. With that he laughed so loud that their lord Arthur was angered. The blood shot for shame into his shining cheeks and face. As wroth as wind he grew. So all did in that place. Then near to the stout man drew the king of fearless raids, and said, Marry, good man, 'tis madness thou askest, and since folly thou hast sought, thou deserves to find it. And says, give me the axe, Arthur. I'll take the axe. So he's baited him. He's goaded him into the battle. Everyone knows this is folly on Arthur's part, right? You don't want to be involved in the beheading game with a green fey man here who's going to let you strike him first. I think there's a trick here. Pretty obvious. And Arthur takes the axe and raises it up, and then a voice comes from the dais as well. Beside the Queen Gawain to the king did then incline. I implore with prayer plain that this match should now be mine. Courtesy. He's going to put himself ahead of his king. He doesn't deserve to hear a response from you. Let him hear from someone like me who is of no worth, of no significance. Would you, my worthy lord, said Gawain to the king, bid me abandon this bench and stand by you there, so that I, without discourtesy, might be excused from the table, and my liege lady here were not loath to permit me, I would come to your council before your courtiers fair. For I find it unfitting, as in fact it is held, when a challenge in your chamber makes choice so exalted, though you yourself be desirous to accept it in person, while many bold men about you on bench are seated. On earth there are, I hold, no more honest of purpose, no figures fairer on field where fighting is waged. I am the weakest, I am aware, and in wit feeblest, and the least loss, if I live not, if one would learn the truth. Only because you were my uncle is honor given me. Save your blood in my body, I boast of no virtue. So here's a man of genuine humility. So up stepped the Christian champion. Arthur is not it. He's already disqualified by his high, prideful view of himself. But up comes the champion of courtesy, Sir Gawain. So now you see, Gawain and the Green Knights called this for a good reason. And Gawain is received very well by the Green Knight, and the other man recognizes him and says that he's pleased that it's Gawain that will take up the battle, because he is famous for his courtesy. And so before he strikes off his head, and he will strike off his head. And not only will he strike off his head, the Green Knight will then pick up his own head, and the head will keep talking, said, I'll see you in a year and a day. It's not great. But before that, he requires him to give an oath. Now, in his oath, because this is not an insignificant theme in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, he asks him to pledge his troth. He had asked him to plight his troth, give his word that he will fulfill the terms of the pact between them. He's going to pledge himself. The importance of covenants between people is greatly discounted in our day, despite the fact that it's one of the most Christian of all features of Scripture, that God covenants with his people, and they are pledged to him in a certain way. He's pledged them and they to him. And truthfulness is part of troth, but there's more to troth plighting than simply telling the truth, although telling the truth is a part of it. But there's a fidelity to the person that you pledge yourself to. It's a covenantal loyalty. It's used in marriage. To plight your troth is to pledge yourself to the person till death do you part. For richer, for poorer, for better, for worse, in sickness and health, etc. These are parts of the marriage oath. And it's called troth plighting. You're going to give your word. And that's what the Green Knight demands of Gawain before the beheading games. So what is connected to then his troth plighting and word giving is his courtesy. His very being as a knight representing Christ is implicit in the act of plighting his troth. And he gives it. He says that he will do as the Green Knight demands, and that in a year and a day he will seek out the Green Knight and allow him to give him back what he gives to begin with, which is the chopping of the head. Anyway, let me leave it off with that, and we'll pick it up next time. I haven't got very far into it. I'm going to conclude